How are you, man?
I'm doing all right. Yeah,
Yeah.
just busy, 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 busy. Having a lot of busy week at work, but this is cool. I'm glad to get to do this.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you. I think the busy week is stretched across the country. Mine was pretty nuts last week. So this week's been okay. So we don't want to jinx it. Maybe it's all put its evil onto you now.
Yeah, a lot of late nights.
so
I got all of it.
yeah. Well, let's
Uh,
let's start with that about your background and your life, and we kind of start there. That's the best place to start. So, why don't you tell everybody kind of your background and how you got started with writing and what you do for a living, and anything else you want to share with folks?
yeah, sure. So, background in life: I'm from a little town in North Carolina called Cerro Gordo, which is Spanish. Um, it's named after a Mexican city where a Mexican American battle happened.
Hmm.
About 200 people, and I grew up on a tobacco farm. I'm the first man in my family to not be a tobacco farmer. Actually, my dad quit when I was young. Um, so yeah, I moved from there to Chapel Hill, North Carolina, to go to college at UNC, and I did journalism. When I got out, I was a reporter for a little while, and
Hmm.
I figured out that I could not be a reporter um, for multiple reasons. I love writing, and I
Yeah.
always have. And I loved, I got the chance to write some longer stories there about topics that I really cared about, which is great. But I did not like the grind of city council
Hmm.
journalism and stuff. You just don't get paid enough for what you're doing, really. But so I had to give that up at some point. The money just wasn't possible, and
Hmm.
yeah, so I had to kind of move into a more corporate communications, marketing stuff. I've had a couple jobs since then, but in the wake of not being a reporter anymore and not being creative, I guess, with my job, um, I had a buddy that lived with me for a little while, and he was writing short fiction. And he was like, "Man, you got to just try it. Since you're not doing anything, you can already write." And yeah, so that was 3 or 4 years ago now, and I wrote 6 stories, and they were awful. Nobody wanted them. I turned them into a little book and sold them to the like 50 people that liked me, which at the time was kind of unbelievable that 50 people wanted to
Yeah.
spend money on it. Yeah, so that's been a while now, and uh, the past year has been very kind to me. I went from, I mean, it took me forever to get one story published anywhere. And then that
Hmm.
happened, and I thought, all right, here we go. I've made it. And then it was
Yeah.
another year and a half before I got the second one. And then
Yeah.
it kind of snowballed after that. And I've I've had quite a few the past 6 months.
You hit a
Yeah.
vein sometimes. I think that's kind of the same thing. I had one right off the bat, then nothing. Then you have last year I had a good year. I had three or four get picked up last year. You said you do communications. That's what I do. So
Oh yeah.
that's interesting to do. You said that about your creativity. Do you find it hard to, for lack of a better word, code switch between the two?
Oh man, I without coming off as bragging whatsoever, just because the area I grew up in, and then having to go to a university. I mean, you've been in cities before, having to be
Hmm.
around a lot of
Hmm.
people that were not country and had
Yep.
no idea what it was like. I just figured out that at some point I was going to have to get pretty good at code switching. Um,
Hmm.
and so not exactly, but I work in a very corporate place right now, and that took me a while to get used to. I think it's just it's a
Yeah.
different style of communication all around.
Yeah. I work in a school, so it's kind of,
Oh yeah.
you're crafting a message, and it's it's always a positive message. And if you don't write, I don't write a lot of positive things. Everybody in my stories are flawed, So I mean, I'm double code switching, right? Like it's not. I go to work and accent changes and the way that I write things change, but the stories that I write, no, they don't. You wouldn't read them in school.
Yeah, my wife always gets on me like, do they have to always be sad?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
We had a conversation the other day about music. And she's like, I was wondering why. I said, why hasn't Adele put out a record here lately? She said, well, because she's happy. I was like, yeah, well, that's true. Like, you don't write many songs when you're just extremely happy. Most of the
That's
good
very
work comes
true.
when you're miserable.
Yep.
So, yeah, I find that. I find that. Are you always on? Like, I feel like with my job, like I'm always on. Like something could happen, and then you're going to have to go do that job. So I tend to do most of my stuff in the morning or at lunch. And I've had to kind of train myself to do it that way. Do you have the same issue, or have you got what's your style? What's your process? When and where do you do it?
Yeah, I would totally agree. And being in a big corporate, I handle a lot of reputation stuff, so you have to be always on at a big company. Things can
Yeah,
pop up,
totally
but
get it.
I'm very introverted, so it's exhausting. And thankfully, I work from home, which is helpful because every
Oh,
time I go into the office, my God, I'm like,
yeah, I would
I
love to
I
be
like
you.
all of these people, but oh
Yeah,
man, I come home and it's like I've worked for 24 hours straight.
yeah. It's
Yeah,
exhausting the stuff that goes on in an office that people don't think about. There's
yeah,
there's always a card to sign. There's always a potluck. There's always a money take up. There's always a fundraiser. There's always somebody in the bathroom. It's just
yeah,
all
yeah,
these little things where if I could be so much more productive at home,
yeah,
and do the same thing. So I'm glad I'm not
yeah.
alone there. It
Yeah,
is exhausting.
I love that I have this little office of mine that has all my books in it and everything. And
Mhm.
I do find you just said it. I am way more productive here because I'm a pretty social person. So the other thing is when I'm in the office, I'm talking to my coworkers the whole
Yeah,
time. I don't feel like I'm getting the
yeah.
work done. Um,
Well, my office is in kind of a pass through. So everybody that's on their way to the bathroom or they're on their way to somebody
oh
else's
yeah,
office, they just want to stop and talk to you. So
that'll
it would
do it.
help.
That'll do it.
It's not conducive to concentration. So yeah.
No.
But I'm a five right now. I'm in between projects. I tend to write short stories in the afternoon. I tend to write
Uh-huh.
novel stuff in the morning. And right now, since I'm in
Yeah.
between novels, like I'm not getting a lot done at 5 o'clock. So from 5 to 7, I'm mainly reading or catching
Yeah.
up on emails or something like that. Are you a 5 o'clocker?
God no. Good for you, man. I can't. I have tried that. I'm a night owl, and I always
Mhm.
have been. And I tried to change at one point, and I just even if I go to sleep early, I'm not going to wake up early.
Yeah.
No, I find that almost all of my writing happens at night. My wife goes to bed early. I come in here and hit Spotify. I have a writing playlist that has so much music, it's ridiculous now. But I turn it on really low just so that I have something in my ear, and I usually work from 10 to 1 or so.
Mhm. Do you
Basically, when yeah, go ahead.
do you cater that list to whatever you're writing?
It's you know, it's actually the whole reason I made that podcast or not podcast, that playlist a couple years ago is it's music that I've heard so many times that
Mhm.
it's like the words are not I'm not hearing it really.
It's just
It's
noise.
it's it's just noise. I'm so comfortable with that music. So it's kind of an eclectic mix, honestly. And
Mhm.
I don't it probably is finding its way into what I'm writing, but
Mhm.
I don't even think I
Some people
notice it.
do that. Some people do that for a mood.
Hmm.
Like I want this story to have a certain mood, so I'm going to listen to, Depeche Mode or whoever I'm,
Hmm.
into at that time. I cannot write or read with noise. So what I have to do is I have to put in headphones and put on like rain or
Uh-huh.
thunder or wind or just brown noise or something. And then I can kind of go to a place. But man, if I've got music going, I'll be singing along to the music in my head and not paying attention, or my mind will wander. So I envy people that can have a playlist and do their work at the same time. I really envy people like my wife who can read a book with the TV going and kids talking, and
Uh-huh.
I can't do that. It just doesn't
It
doesn't sink in.
it has to be this playlist for
Yeah.
for it to work. If it's any other music that I just haven't heard enough, even if I love the music, I'm gonna be because I love music, and that's kind of where
Mhm.
I was creatively before I started writing. Um,
Oh, you too. So here we go.
yeah. Oh, I heard
There,
I heard you talk about it on maybe the last podcast.
it's on every podcast. So
Yeah.
everybody, so all the ones that are coming up, maybe except for one, are like ex-musicians or had some form of musical training or some
Yeah.
relationship with music. That is so fascinating. So
Yeah.
so what's yours?
Yeah, I was in a band in high school, and I won't make any more of it than it was, but we wrote a lot of music and we played small town festivals and stuff, and
Hmm.
had a lot of fun. And then in college I recorded an album, and I won't tell you what the name of it is. It's not under my name, and I don't tell anybody what it is anymore.
Man, this
But
is my this is my story.
yeah, it's
Have we ever been in the same room at the same time?
yeah, I don't think so. Oh, yeah, it's I'm a perfectly fine musician. I led worship at our church for a while until
Hmm.
my job just got too big for me to work 60 or 70 hours a week. But I love music. I have spent a lot of money on guitars and stuff, and
Hmm.
honestly, I saw somebody tweet about it not too long ago. Of when you can't figure something out in your writing, why don't you pick up your guitar if you're a guitar player, do something like that. And I have
Hmm.
found that happens all the time with me,
Yeah.
where
If
I'm comfortable in it, I guess.
yeah, I have I am with guitars like some men are with cars, I think.
Hmm.
I've had so many good ones, and now I'm down to I've got a Gibson J15 and I've got a little Martin double O, and that's all I've got left. But
Yeah.
man, the I've had electric guitars, amplifiers, you name it. And then after a while, after your band breaks up and you just realize I could make more money doing this by myself, acoustic guitars are all you need, that and a little acoustic amp. So that's all I've got.
Hmm.
So
I
that is
actually have
so
a
interesting.
Martin Double O as well. It's the John Mayer signature. So the
Yeah.
neck is really skinny like an electric guitar.
Yeah.
Um,
So mine's the Shawn Mendes one that they just
oh
came
yeah,
out
yeah,
with.
very
Yeah.
similar guitar. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. And I like it a lot. It
they're
sounds
awesome.
really good. And that Gibson was a wedding present from my wife, so I'm never getting rid of that.
That's awesome.
Um, yeah, but I mean, my gosh, all the guitars I've got, it makes me sick to think about it. Um, yeah, we had a high school band. We played a few dances and talent shows, and then college band, played local festivals, recorded an album. So yeah, I was that rings true. All of that.
Yeah, it was awesome. I'll actually say I was thinking about this today because I'm reading a book right now, and there's some of the characters are musicians, and I was thinking about I hardly ever write musicians or music into my stuff.
Me neither.
And I don't know if it's just there's a split in my brain and one's on the other side and I can't talk
Hmm.
about it or something. But I just
Yeah,
realized I don't even want to touch it really.
yeah. I wrote one short story one time about a man that lived in a rural area, and he'd inherited the family farm, and he resented that he'd given up music, and he never touched his guitar. The whole story was about him not touching the guitar,
Hmm.
and his wife really wanting him to play it, and he didn't want to play it. But that's the only story I've ever written about music, and it's not really about music. So
Right.
that's interesting.
I wrote it into one, and I know that we have both been published in the Dead Mule.
Hmm. Hmm.
And the one time I had it in there was the story in the Dead Mule is like a high school kid, and I mean, there's like a couple scenes where he's playing guitar, and I kind of took that from my thing. But otherwise, it just hit me today. Like, I mean, none of my characters are musical at all.
Yeah, no, it's real strange, and I've I've had two of the best. Here's the other thing too. Two of the better stories that I've written, and one of the one that was published in the Mule, they're both written from a children's perspective,
Mm-hmm.
which is really strange because I'm 44 years old. I'm a long way from a child, but it still worked. I guess it worked in that sense. And one of those was a girl, so that's even more different.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the Mule are good people. They picked that thing
Yeah.
up, and I was
Yeah, they're awesome.
pleased. I was pleased with it. I want one of those shirts. What was your Southern legitimacy statement?
Yeah, it was that I'm from a town. I can't remember exactly what I said, but I'm from a town that no one's ever heard of. 200 people. I grew up on a tobacco farm, and when I try to tell people where I'm from, I have to triangulate cities that are 30 minutes away.
Yeah, and they probably think that it's in California or something
Well,
with
you
that
know
name.
what? The Dead Mules actually run out of Wilmington, North Carolina. So
So
luckily,
they knew
I'm
it. They
sure
knew
that
it.
she knows where Cerro Gordo is. She's
Yeah,
seen it on a sign
yeah.
before. But
Mine was I used to race with chickens in the backyard when my grandpa cut their head off, and I once inadvertently bought a goat at a sale barn. All true. All true.
That's good. That's good. I
Both
really
of
appreciated that
yeah,
they do that. I thought that was
yeah.
awesome.
I think it's cool, and some of them you read and you're like, yeah, I don't know about that one. But
Yeah,
yeah, you're
that's
Southern
funny.
adjacent.
Yeah, yeah, that's
Speaking
very true.
of where you're from, some of my favorite writers are North Carolina writers.
Good
And
question.
North Carolina, I think, as a state, has always had rich
Hmm.
literary history, but they're really having a moment right now.
Hmm.
So, who do you dig the most out of North Carolina right now?
Oh man, that's a good question. Gosh, I mean, Ron Rash is like the obvious pick.
Hmm.
Um, and I'm terrible for forgetting names. I just saw his name up there. I just read David Joy for the first time, which you've talked about him quite a lot on this. I just read his new book, and it was spectacular. Also,
Yeah, yeah.
um, yeah, man. I think those are the two. I'm trying to think of that
If you
North
just read
Carolina.
David for the first time,
Yeah.
the story you sent me, I'll recommend one that kind of goes hand in hand with the story that you sent that we'll talk about later.
Uh-huh.
You should read The Line That Held Us. That's
I
a
saw it.
yeah.
I saw that.
You'll like that one. Anything David writes is good. And Ron, you've probably
I'll
heard me
write
talk
that
on here
down.
before. Ron was nice enough to talk to me on the phone
Yeah.
and give me some advice, and just a solid dude. And that was out of the blue. I didn't expect him to, one, answer the email, two, let alone say, I'll call you, So
Yeah.
never,
Yeah. That's awesome.
I'm never deleting that phone number. I'll
Man,
never call it again, but I'll keep it in my
that
phone.
I have found, and I won't speak for all of it, and I'm not gonna say that all country people are wonderful people. I've met plenty of awful country people, but when I heard that story, I just thought there's so many people that aren't writers exactly, they're lawyers, whatever it is, but
Mhm.
people that were well established back home. That it was the exact same thing. When I became a journalist, I was in college and I needed to write stories for my classes. I would reach out to people and say, "Hey, can I write a story about you? It's just for my class. It's not going to go anywhere." And I just thought
Mhm.
so many times I was surprised by, I don't know what it is, the generosity of time that Southern people will give that maybe is different. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's different. Maybe it's different. Maybe it's not. But that just reminded me of some other people that
I
I've known.
think the the way I was raised is if somebody takes the time to ask you for your help, you should help them,
Hmm.
you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And man, that's ironic. I had somebody do that to me today. Somebody sent me a an inbox, a DM on Twitter, and they'd written a story, and they said, "Will you look at this story and give me some advice on this story? I'm trying to
Hmm.
do X, Y, Z with this story." And I was getting ready for this, and I thought, yeah, one, it was micro, so that made it easy. Like it wasn't
Mm-hmm.
that long.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I knocked it out and sent it right back, not because it made me feel good, just because, somebody asked a favor, and if you can return the favor, you should. Now, they don't have to use my
Yeah.
suggestion or anything, but it also helps being from rural areas and talking about country people. They're not the most literary places.
Yeah. Right.
There's not a
Yeah.
lot of outlets around here for what we're even doing right now. If I wanted to
Mm-mm.
talk to another writer, I would have to probably go to Oxford, Mississippi.
Mm-hmm.
If I wanted to find like a community. It's so funny. Last weekend, about 3 years ago, we had a tornado that blew our Barnes and Noble away.
Mm.
And last year, we had a local lady open a independent bookstore, and it's really small, but it was the only bookstore we had till last Saturday. And the Barnes and Noble opened up, and now we finally got
Mm.
a bookstore where we can go find stuff again. But man, that was 3 years in the desert of not
Gosh.
having anything or any kind of outlet. So I was talking last week with Hank Jost on here, and
Mm-hmm.
it was just, I didn't have a community, so I tried to create one. There's all these cool
Yeah.
people online that talk to each other, and everybody's funny, and they make their jokes, and they celebrate when somebody does something well or gets something published. And I thought, it's real easy to just talk to these people and let people see their face and let people hear their voice, and then they can pimp their work or do whatever they want to do on here, because we don't have any outlets to do that,
You're right.
you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
And then maybe one day down the road we can have like the um, I don't know, the Fair to Middlin conference where we all get together and play really crap music and read stories.
Man, that sounds awesome. You know what I'm just now realizing is that, and I live in Raleigh, North Carolina now.
Mhm.
There's a Barnes and Noble within a mile of my house, and
Yeah.
there's a great independent bookstore that I love too. But I, where I grew up, there was not a bookstore within 45 minutes. I had to go to Myrtle Beach to
Okay.
go to Barnes and Noble or Books a Million or something, and I mean, there still isn't a bookstore, and I don't think there's one in the county that I'm from. Now that I think about it,
Well,
um,
and then you go, which is funny, right? Because that side of, like, just like kind of like Arkansas and North Carolina kind of share geographically
mhm.
kind of what's going on, but in the reverse. Um, my side of the state, there's not a lot of anything.
Yeah,
In the Northwest Arkansas side, there's everything. It might as well be the
mhm.
Midwest. And then you say on where you were, no bookstore within 45 minutes. And then in Asheville, you've got malaprops and like
The
just
best
this
bookstores you've ever
literary
seen. Yeah, yeah,
community.
yeah.
Yeah. Did you ever feel cheated? Like, why do I live here? I look at my wife all the time. I'm
Oh,
like, why do we live here? Why do
I
we live here?
man, the first time I went to Asheville and I realized how many bookstores there were, I was
Hmm.
just totally blown away. It's like probably my favorite city on earth. I adore
Yeah.
that place, and I go any chance I get. Yeah, I totally agree. Oh my god, I mean the number of times now that I've gotten more and more in the writing community and stuff, and met more people, they're just not around here. You're right.
Yeah.
There's not a lot around here, and there are definitely times where I'm like, God, I wish I lived closer to all of these places. But
Hmm.
I love North Carolina for what it is, I
Yeah.
guess.
I do too. I'd move to North Carolina in a heartbeat. Um, but I'd move to that area. I'd like Western North Carolina, East Tennessee is gorgeous. Like
It's amazing.
it's really cool.
Yeah.
Um, we don't want to lose my train of thought here. You were talking about books. Um, what is the one book, if there is a book, that
Mm.
inspired you to become a writer, or is there a book that touched you in a way that made you reassess things? And it's so funny that I'm asking this because I'm having a moment with a book right now of somebody I've read before, but this book is some of his older. It's a Jim Harrison book.
Okay.
It was written in 2004. True North. Have you read that?
No, I haven't.
So I picked that up 2 weeks ago. It's about 400 pages, and I'm working my way through it at lunch and at bedtime. But man, it's a riveting book. Like, and it's shown me ways to write sentences in a way that I'm not used to writing sentences.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that has to do with his poetry and how he writes his other stuff. But it's just it's Faulknerian, but it's not. And then it's like simple, but it's not. It's like this happy medium of where he's telling a complex story in such a simple way that I'm all caught up in it. So, right, I mean, the book that if I was to answer the question I'm asking you right now would be Absalom, Absalom by William Faulkner. But I'm reassessing that this one may be maybe my second favorite book.
Yeah. That's all. I'll have to check that out. I'm making every time you mention a book, I'm writing it down.
Yeah.
I think I think I could answer it in multiple ways, which is kind of the same thing that you're finding right now. When I was in high school, I read this book called It's Kind of a Funny Story, which is a movie with Zach Galifianakis in it. But it's about a kid who he goes to kill himself, and then he commits himself to a psychiatric ward instead. He's in high school, and it's just a wonderful book that's hilarious, and that was the first time that I read something, and I without getting too cliche here, I felt like this was I'm in the book. This is it. I'm seeing all of this. And I think that's always in the back of my mind. I think about that book all the time. But when I first started writing short fiction, it was actually This Side of Paradise by F. Scott Fitzgerald. And I don't write anything like Fitzgerald. I've read all of his stuff. I think he's fantastic. I think The Great Gatsby is good, but it's nowhere near the rest of his stuff.
100% agree with you.
I read that book, and it just like I just wanted to write. And then my buddy told me to read East of Eden, and then I saw a whole other side that I couldn't have imagined.
The ones that people tell me to read are the ones that I get the least amount from, I think.
Yeah.
So I read Gatsby, and when I finished, I was kind of like you. I'm like, it's good, but you read the other stuff, and you're like, whoa, And then I read The Sun Also Rises, and I finished that, and I was like, it's just it's a book about wholly unlikable people just drunk the entire time.
Yeah.
And that's really being an ass about it. That's not what it's about. But if you're just taking a superficial read of it, that's what you're going to come out of there with. It's obviously about a lot more. But the other Hemingway stuff I like better. His shorter stuff.
The Nick Adams.
The Nick Adams and all those stories that he wrote early on are just, they're unbelievable to me. What he was able to do with language. Yeah. That was one of the questions I got editing that story today. One of the critiques I gave him was, I was like, kill all the adverbs. Like we don't need all those adverbs. And I was asked again, is that just for short fiction, or is that for all writing? And I said, adverbs need to go to the wilderness and die. That was my, just helpful info, because I mean, that's one of the first things they taught us in school was, if you're showing the reader what's happening, you don't have to tell them what's going on. I don't, if the room is silent and it's raining outside and you're soaked from being out in the rain, and you close the door behind you and slide down the door and break into tears, you don't have to tell the reader that you were sobbing. You don't have to say that you felt sad, or that it's little things like that. Or if Maria runs in the door and tosses her bag on the floor and jumps into John's arms, like, you don't have to know she's happy. You don't have to say she did it happily. And I think it's just little things like that the good writers knew how to do. And I think that's, like you say, I think there's a lot of that connects, like those short stories. The Nick Adams stories, unreal. Ron's stories, his short stories do that. Larry Brown's short stories do that.
I just actually opened, and I got so many books laying around, I don't know where it is. I just opened a Larry Brown book for the first time and read a story the other day.
What book is it?
It's come on now, dog something. Big bad
Boy and dog. Oh, Big Bad Love.
Big Bad Love. That's what he's got a
Yeah.
dog in the cover. That's why I'm
Yeah.
saying that. Big
Big
Bad
Bad
Love.
Love.
Yes, I read the
Yeah.
first story in that the other day.
Yeah.
It was
What's the
awesome.
first story in Big Bad Love? Because I've got Tiny Love. It's like an anthology of everything.
I'll tell you.
Big
Hold
Bad
on.
Love is really, really good.
Oh, I've got so many bookshelves. I keep running out of space.
I think in Tiny Love, the first story is plant growing season.
This one is Falling Out of Love.
Oh, yeah.
The first line, listen to this. Sheena baby, the one that I loved and I were walking around.
That's it. That's it. That's the one where they're at the gas station, right?
Yeah, the next
Yeah.
the next paragraph starts. Sheena baby was love, a sex kitten goddess. And he's awesome. I was like,
Yeah.
all right, I'm reading this. This is
That
great.
story. And it's a hell of a story to crank off that book with, because Big Bad Love's the title. That's not the title story, but that's some kind of love him and Sheena Baby have got going in that story.
Yeah, that really got me. Anyways, yeah, I got us off track. But yeah, I think the sentence wise, like you're talking about inspiration from the way that people write and making you want to write sentences differently. I decided to read all of Cormac last year, and I had
Oh,
read
yeah.
The Road and No Country for Old Men and things like that. But I decided I was going to make it the year that I read Cormac.
Yeah.
And you can't help but write differently. You know, I'm never going to be Cormac McCarthy, and I'm not even consciously trying to be, because
Yeah.
it's impossible. But you leave it changed as a writer. There's no way you can't.
There's a lyricism to it, this biblical thing that he does, especially with Blood Meridian.
Yep.
That book is everybody. So there's two things I find with Blood Meridian, a book that I absolutely just cherish. That's a wonderful book. There's two things people focus on with that book. One is the violence, and three is the judge.
Yep.
That's all anybody wants to talk about. It's the violence and the judge. But it's the way that he writes about both of those things that makes it so effective when you read it. And
Yep.
I mean that with an A, not an E. Like, it affects you in a way when you read it that at certain points in that book, you love the judge, you think he's funny, then you find him mysterious, and then he's just just the picture of evil by the end of it. And then you're trying to figure out, well, is he some kind of allegory for something else? And by the time you get to the book, you're all caught up in that. And then the violence is not only just tied with him, but it's the whole thing's when I read that book, I think about what are we as humans?
Yeah.
To what ends do the means, make up?
Amen.
And
yeah.
it's a ridiculous book. Like,
I just had a friend read it for the first time this past weekend. He finished it.
Yeah. And if you've not read the book, you've got to go. If you're going to okay, so this is my advice, right? Like, get an easy McCarthy to read first, something like The Orchard Keeper or Outer Dark, something short.
Yeah, All the Pretty Horses, maybe.
All the Pretty Horses. Ease yourself in. Even No Country for Old Men and The Road aren't very long.
No.
And then after you get used to the style and the lack of punctuation and all of that, which to me, I love it. I wish more publishers would let you get away with it. What did he say? I don't like extra marks messing up my page.
Yeah. It doesn't look good on the page. Something like that.
Yeah. Then go straight to Blood Meridian. It's
I would pretty much
unreal.
agree. Yeah.
I watched an interview with Harold Bloom talking about Blood Meridian and how he thinks it's the greatest American novel ever written. And I was a Faulkner guy for the longest time until I read that book, and that book is something else.
I think I would agree. And it's not even my favorite Cormac, to be honest with you. But I it's almost like, how could it be your favorite? It's exhausting. You leave it, you feel awful. Yeah. There's no warm fuzzies in that book. There's not even a positive note.
You don't even know how it ends when it's over.
Well, right, yes. Yeah, you're left to infer the most gruesome possible thing. Yeah,
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 yeah.
yeah.
And your mind goes 100 different directions. Like, okay, I think I know what happened, but do I really
Uh-huh.
want to take my mind there to understand what just happened? You know,
Man,
and then there's
yeah.
that epilogue, which is
My favorite
just
epilogue.
mystic, you
Yeah,
know, and nobody can do that. And I hate that he's gone, but
yeah,
man, that was unreal. I've got his last two. I haven't
yeah.
opened them yet. I haven't read either
Well,
one,
I'll
and I
tell
need
you,
to.
I am going to be in the minority on this opinion. And for example, Aaron Gwynn, you might know on Twitter, he's the
Yeah,
Blood Meridian scholar.
yeah.
He thinks these are Cormac's worst two books.
I've
I
heard that.
I don't think they're his best book. I think Suttree is his best book,
Yep.
or The Crossing are kind of my 1 and 2, depending on the day. But I have never had two books, or one book, we'll call them, stay
Yeah.
with me. I wanted, as soon as I finished, I wanted to read again. And I did. I read it again at the start of this year. And I think I'm going to read it again every year for the rest of my life. I mean, there's all this mystery, and some of it might just be plot holes, to be
Yeah.
honest. But I am really hesitant to believe that. And there are parts in that book, The Passenger specifically, that are so amazing and wonderful and mysterious. And I read them and then I just read the same page over and over again. I mean, I've never had something stick with me as long as those books did.
There's something special about that. I talked about this. Maybe was it? I can't remember if it was the second one or if it's coming up in the third one. You were talking about David Joy earlier. He was talking
Mm-hmm.
about Daniel Woodrell writing the first chapter of Tomato Red, and you can read. He said he read that chapter over and over and over for 3 months, trying to figure out what he was
I
doing
think
and
that was
how
in
he,
your first one.
yeah, how he did that. And and then I read it, and it is ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's painting with words in a way, and McCarthy could do that. What I wish we would have got from McCarthy was more McCarthy. You know, he was such a,
Mm-hmm.
not so much a recluse, because he would give interviews, and they were good interviews whenever I saw him give an interview, but
Yeah.
he was so just dedicated to his craft, and so just didn't care about the extra stuff, that he kind of
Yeah.
became an enigma more than a writer.
Yeah. Yeah. What
Uh,
did he, you might know this, when he was dirt poor, living with his wife in the top of a barn. They had to
mhm.
bathe in the lake out back, and he got a call from a university asking him to come speak about, maybe it was Blood Meridian. I can't. No, I don't think it was Blood Meridian. Anyways, before that, he gets a call and they say, "We'll pay you like $2,000 to come speak about your book." And he said, "Everything you need to know is on the page."
Yeah, 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 and he's taking a bath in a pond, you
Fun.
know. Yeah, it's just, I've never seen somebody that way. That's just so, maybe artists, you know, painters, or you know,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
stereotypical starving artist, but I don't think he was coming from it from that. I think he was just so dedicated to what he was doing. We could have a whole series on
Man,
McCarthy
I
and
could
that.
talk about him all day long. The only point I wanted to make when you talked about the biblical,
Yeah,
um, it's pretty obvious that he read the King James Bible a
yeah,
lot, whether
yeah,
or not he believed in it, whatever.
yeah.
But I just saw, and maybe you saw this, a tweet that was talking about the start of Blood Meridian. There's a line where it says that the child's parents were hewers of wood. I think that's
Hmm.
from Joshua.
Hmm.
It's just a phrase in Joshua.
Yeah,
I mean, you won't find that phrase anywhere else in literature,
and he just
and
lays it in there.
he just lays it in there. And I was like, maybe I need to start doing this. I mean,
I think it's on the first
yes,
page, if
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
not
it
wrong.
is. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's in like
yeah,
the third. I think it's the third line, maybe.
yeah.
But and then you're going. I mean, how many of these references are we just totally missing because we don't have the Bible memorized? You know, whatever. That's just
That's the thing.
fantastic.
Yeah, and Harrison did that in this book too. He talks a lot about One, the King James Bible he brings up in this story a lot because the character in this story grew up Episcopalian, which connected with me because I am, and
Mm.
then he became he's becoming a Baptist preacher because he sought the truth in the King James Bible, right? Well, I was raised Southern Baptist and I drifted the other way.
Oh,
So
that's pretty
I
good.
became Episcopalian. So this guy is Episcopalian and he's going the other
Uh,
direction because he feels somehow constrained by liturgy, you know?
uh-huh.
So it's just, it's so interesting.
That's
Like
awesome.
there's always this thing, I think, I'm going to steal from. We talked about the dead mule earlier. There's that Faulkner quote about all southern good southern writing has to have a dead mule in it. But I think it's also, if you remember, I don't know if you read it or not. I wrote that thing for Poverty House on cover books,
Yeah, yeah,
and
I read it.
all good southern writing has to have some religion in it. I think because that's so entwined in the culture that I
Yeah,
think if you don't have, I think you can get away with it in other areas of the country, but I think even the worst Southern person still has this innate, almost biological fear of going to hell, you
it's
know?
around you all the
Uh,
time. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
And it is, especially if you grew up evangelical and now you're not. Now, if you're more
hmm,
mainline, you can, like, that fear was such a thing, like this fear of, oh my god, I'm going to die and go to hell, oh my god, I got to say my prayers, or this is something bad's going to happen. And I think for a lot of folks,
yeah.
we can have a whole theological discussion on this. I just think for a lot of folks, this is a big
It's
statement, I hope I don't offend anybody. I think for a lot of folks, Jesus was more the boogeyman than he was the
uh-huh.
savior, and I
Yeah.
think that's a tricky thing to come to terms with when you're little. And
Hmm.
I think for a lot of folks that kind of causes that, I don't
Oh
know,
yeah,
Southern
absolutely. No,
anxiety. Is that what we can call it? Southern anxiety.
it's hand in hand. Yeah, yeah,
Hmm.
totally. Oh, I grew up around plenty of fire and brimstone preachers.
Yeah.
So yeah, you grow, you're raised with a healthy dose of fear of God. Yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
It's
Yeah.
yeah, and I read that and I totally agree. I just finished writing a novel for the first time, and it's impossible to avoid. I didn't even want it really. It wasn't a choice that I was actively making.
Hmm.
But it's there throughout, and then it becomes, I won't say religion becomes central, but it's right there at the end. It's right there in the middle. I mean,
Hmm.
it kind of wraps around the whole thing, even
It
though I
ended up,
didn't.
yeah, it ended up in my novel. I mean, the one that got picked up is about I mean,
Hmm.
they're active in their church. Their kids go to a private school. It's a religious school, but they're not overtly religious. Like that's the
Hmm.
thing. Like they're almost anti what they're living. Like they're the antithesis of what they're holding up in the
Mm.
public eye, which is very much that's very much a Southern thing too, putting on airs. I mean, they're trying to live this one life and have it look good to the people in town, but underneath there's all kinds of twisted stuff
Yeah.
going on, and you see that too. I'm
Oh
glad you
yeah.
said that about a novel because I've went to your website. I read your stuff. I read the story you sent me, and you so far it's been short fiction. You were talking about a novella in your book of short stories, so we can go talk about the novel in just a second. But
Sure.
um, let's talk about this. I'm going to put two little creepers up here. One is your work and what can readers expect. We'll put that up first, and then the
Okay.
second part of that is, since you write a lot of short fiction, what's the key to good short fiction?
Okay. Gosh. All right. So my work and what you can expect. That's a good question. I have changed it around so many times that I don't even know what the answer to it is. I think that I think that I try to come from a place of sincerity. I think is where I would start. I think
Hmm.
that a lot of fiction, and I say this as I've written a whole novella that is not Southern. It has nothing to do with Southern. It's about AI and a writing
I saw
commune and
that.
all
I
this other
saw
stuff.
that. Yeah.
And I wrote it for fun. And anyways, that is an incredibly sarcastic book. I sometimes get really bogged down in the sarcasm in fiction these days, especially in
Mm,
short fiction. There's just a lot of flash and stuff like that. And I read flash for a magazine, and it can certainly work. But sincerity is not thrown in your face very often in fiction these days.
yeah.
And I just can't get away from it, I guess. So a lot of my stories are maybe earnest and um, I don't know, man. I like writing about people that are yearning for something, I guess, and they can't get it. I think that's what probably falls through every story that I write.
Mm.
Um,
That
I
kind of
had
happens in
a
the
yeah,
story you sent me.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah, and that one's a little bit darker than I
in a
normally
dark
go.
way. Yeah, in a dark way though. I mean, they're both
Mm-hmm.
wanting something at the end, and you
Mm-hmm.
could argue in a way they both get what they want at the end of the story
Uh,
without giving it away. But
yeah.
yeah, I always say that I write about ordinary people doing questionable things,
Uh-huh.
you know, and yeah,
Yeah.
sincerity. That's a good point. I think sincerity has to be there and authenticity.
Yeah.
If you can do those two things well, then I think you've got half the battle won. The rest of it's just coming up with the story and the characters, I think.
I liked your conversation, the first one, talking about authenticity. I listened to that while driving, and I don't even think I had a long drive. I can't remember where I was going,
Mm.
but I don't even think I listened to anything after it was over. I was just thinking the whole time. What does authenticity mean in
Yeah.
writing? I
Well,
think
I'm
that's a
sure.
big conversation.
Well, I'm sure you saw my rant last week about the book I was reading.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Um,
What was
I,
the Pappy?
yeah, I've got my
Yeah.
Pappy hat on today.
Yeah, yeah.
Ironically, um, but it's little things like
Uh-huh.
that, and I'm not to beat a dead horse. I don't even want to go back down that road, but it all plays into it. Like that stuff has to be right, or else you
Mhm.
lose credibility with folks. And
Yeah.
funny enough, I read some other reviews of that book, and a lot of the things that rang hollow with me rang hollow with everybody else.
Yeah.
So, but some people loved it, and that's the joy of fiction, I guess, because the stuff that I get hung up on,
Mm.
nobody else gets hung up on. Because, like you said, I'm not from North Carolina, right? So
Mhm.
I can't sing the praises of Cheerwine. I can't talk about you know seeing the Avett brothers early, or anything like that. And if I did, I'd just be
Yeah.
straight making it up. And
Uh-huh.
those are just two really superficial things.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good one though. That's
I
good.
can't say that my uncle's cousin went to high school with Michael Jordan,
Uh-huh.
and or try to just there's certain things that I wouldn't try to do. I wouldn't
Yeah.
try to write a story set in another state because I don't think I could
Mm.
pull it off. I had the hardest part I had with my novel was getting the portions of it that took place in Mississippi correct.
Man,
Because
let me tell you something. My
yeah,
novel starts in Mississippi.
yeah. The only reason the only reason I felt comfortable doing that is because I went to grad school in Mississippi. And
That's
I
yeah.
think if you live amongst people for a little while, you can glean enough to get some plot points out of it. But I couldn't write something set in Mississippi. So the protagonist in my book's brother went to school at Ole Miss, and he meets a girl from there. And maybe one chapter of the book takes place in Mississippi, and it's just their
Mm.
initial interaction. And then they moved to Arkansas. But it had to be there because that's where he went to law school.
Mm.
So
Mhm.
it I think you can get away with that, but God, I wouldn't write anything set set there and
Man,
pull it off.
I sh- I I'll I'll say a little thing and then I'll answer the short fiction question because I have an
Mm-hmm.
answer, I think. But my novel is loosely based on my great grandfather who was born in Mississippi. He was Choctaw, and
Mm-hmm.
it has to start there. It's where he was born. I can't start in
Mm-hmm.
North. It's kind of an important thing that it happens there. I had to read a whole bunch, and I don't know if I did it well. I won't try to say that I did it well. I'm sure that I'm gonna have to fix some stuff, and that's gonna come along the way, I guess. But I I have a writing club, and I gave them the first 50 pages, and they said, Trent, you we're so used to you describing the scenery so well.
Yeah.
Where is that? And I was
Yeah.
like, I've never been to Mississippi. I'm really struggling with this. And
Yeah.
it takes place in the 20s on. I didn't grow up in the 20s. So I've never
Hmm.
lived on a reservation like my great grandfather did. So there's a lot of
Hmm.
things that I really struggled with. And I don't know that I'll ever try it again. I did my absolute best. And
What part of Mississippi is it?
it's Choctaw, Mississippi. So it's,
Okay. Yep.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yep.
And then it goes down to Jackson for the state fair in
Hmm.
1938, I guess. But
Yeah.
yeah, so that was really hard. I'll say that. And your point about the little details, I was close to finishing writing, and I realized the character has asthma, and
Hmm.
I'd given him an inhaler, and it suddenly hit me. They didn't have inhalers back then. What was I
No,
thinking?
not then. Yeah, that's
So
right.
I had to do a whole bunch of research and go back and rewrite all the things that said inhaler. Thank God there was something, and it was asthma cigarettes, which you can pretty much interchange with an
Yeah.
inhaler. But
Yeah.
that did make me have to go back and think. I just had done it and not even thought about it. Um, Good short fiction. I have been reading submissions for the past couple of days to the magazine that I read flash for is called Jake.
Hmm.
We're the punkest little shit you know is our tagline, and
Yeah. Yeah. It's got a great tagline.
um, where it's awesome. And but I read a lot. I won't pretend to know anything really, but if I had to say what I think makes a good story that I want to publish in Jake, it comes down to, are the sentences good?
Hmm.
And I use this phrase all the time, and I'm not sure that I'd be good at defining it, but does it slap me in the face at some point?
Hmm.
And hopefully, does it slap me in the face multiple times?
Yeah.
Those are the two things that I care about. You can have problems throughout the rest of the story, and I'll totally forget about them if you do something that just makes me go, "Oh my god!"
Yeah.
And then if your sentences are good, I think it's pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah, and that goes two ways too, because if you get too out there with your "oh my god" moments, then it can turn people off too. So it's finding that
Yeah,
happy
yeah,
medium of doing that. Some people do that so well. Um,
yeah.
I mean,
George
I,
Saunders, I think, is the best.
yeah,
I think you've mentioned
yeah,
him before. He does
yeah,
that. He sprinkles it in this like incredibly artful manner, but
yeah.
when you try to write your own George Saunders story, you
It's
realize
tough.
how
It's
damn
tough.
good he is.
Yeah, and that, I've
Yeah.
brought up Barry Hannah before, and then on
Uh-huh.
the last pod with Hank, I talked a lot, and this will kind of be review now because I've already brought it up on one. But Scott McClanahan is
Hmm.
just unbelievable to me in the way that he can do that in a short story. Like Crapalachia, what a book,
I
you
need.
know?
I've just found the R&R magazine. He had. I don't know if you've seen. He had a story in it, and I can't remember. It's some of the porpoise. I can't remember the name of it, but it was that same. We're talking about
Mhm,
the same idea. It was
mhm.
fantastic.
Is it
Yeah.
recent, that magazine?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's
Because he
Relegation
hasn't
Books and
done
Records.
anything. He hasn't done anything in a while, so I'd like to read that.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
he writes in there about one of his friends has OCD,
Hmm.
and his tick is that he keeps telling people the story of the Greenbrier ghost. So what he'll do is he'll be telling a story and they'll do something, and I can't remember the character's name now. We'll just claim Timmy. And he'll say, and we did this, and Timmy told us the story of the Greenbrier ghost. And then we'll do something else, and they'll be talking about doing something completely different. And Timmy was telling us that he did this at school, and he did this at school, and then he told us about the Greenbrier ghost, and then he told
That's
us about
awesome.
his sister, and his sister with this, and then he told us about the Greenbrier ghost again. And it's just the way that he kind of weaves all that in there together.
Uh-huh.
It's just unreal.
That's
It
awesome.
does. It's unreal. The Sarah book does that too. I think the first line in the Sarah book is "I'm the best drunk driver that I know." You know, and it's he's driving down the road with his kids in the back of the car, and he's wasted. It's just you're like, okay, this is it. Literally, we're like, you say to yourself, "We're going for a ride with this book," you know, because that's the
Yeah, yeah,
opening
yeah, yeah.
line.
It sets the scene. That's awesome.
Yeah, but certain people can do that, and do it well. And then some people come off as fraud's too big of a word.
Just trying too hard, I think, a lot of
Yeah, try
times.
hard. Yeah, you can see, you can tell when somebody's trying to ape somebody else's work,
Oh yeah,
and we all do that, but you've got to be a good thief,
yeah, right.
like
Hey, and I think Cormac, for example, I mean, he said books are made of books.
mm-hmm.
If you read his first 3 novels, you're like, all right, Faulkner Jr. I mean,
Yeah,
it's just Faulkner. He's just trying to be, and
yeah,
I think he may have admitted that multiple times.
yeah, yeah, and he
It
got a
takes a
lot of
skill.
criticism for it too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. It takes a certain amount of skill, and you just get better at it.
There's a quote. I'm going to get this wrong. Uh, I know I'm going to get this wrong, and some Faulkner scholar is going to some Faulkner scholar is going to pull me up on it. But I know, being a good Southern kid, you have probably seen Ken Burns' Civil War before, the
Of
PBS
course, yeah,
documentary.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
Shelby Foote in
Uh
there.
huh.
He's
Uh
from
huh.
Memphis, and Foote and Faulkner were buddies. And there was a this is the part I'm going to get wrong. One of the criticisms of Shelby Foote was that the thing about Foote's writing is that William Faulkner already exists. So it's one of those things. Everybody steals.
Yeah,
You just can't
yeah,
be
yeah.
too open about it.
Right. Yeah.
That's one of the things we learned in school. They're like, you got to be a good thief, and if you're a good thief, then people are going to see that you've done your reading and you know
Uh
what you're
huh.
doing, but you're not openly stealing from somebody.
Yeah, man. I mean, they're stealing from multiple people,
Yeah.
and they have created this voice, if you want to call it, that
Hmm.
is distinctly some percentage of them and some percentage of all these other writers. And so when
Hmm.
you try to steal it from them, I mean, how many writers are you imitating in one thing? It's impossible.
Yeah.
So you gotta figure out this balance of who am I and all of this stuff,
Yeah. And
just
then
like
you
they
think
did.
about the people you read and how they all morph into one person. I was
Yeah.
looking at my bookshelf. There was a tweet going around a long time ago, like, who do you have the most of on your bookshelf? And
Hmm.
mine was David Joy, Larry Brown, Ron Rash, Hemingway, and Kurt Vonnegut.
Yeah, I love
And it's
Kurt
like
Vonnegut.
it's like Sesame Street, though. Which one of these is not like the other? you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
but you want to talk about sincerity and authenticity.
Uh-huh.
Even though Vonnegut's some of his stuff can be out there, you'll
Hmm.
find nothing more sincere than a Kurt Vonnegut book.
Oh my
I mean,
goodness. Yeah.
in the way
Yeah.
he handles death and the way he handles relationships, and a lot of people want to I've heard a lot of arguments between grad students about, well, so it goes. It's just so callous. Like, how can,
Hmm.
when somebody dies, you're just like, oh well.
Hmm.
But the
Hmm.
point is, he's seen so many people die that he's just got to the point of, this is life. So goes life. Another one dies. And
Yep.
there's
Yep.
a sincerity to that, and it's not callous. It's just in the way that you're doing it. And I think for him that was authentic. I think if you've saw what he saw, that's I could never write a war novel that's a straight war novel. You know,
No, man. Yeah. I
um,
was gonna say Slaughterhouse 5. When you get to the page, it's somewhere over there. When you get to the page in the tombstone and it says everything was beautiful and nothing hurt,
yes, yeah.
that's
You want to
like,
put you want to put it on your
oh,
own tombstone.
man, I
You
was
know,
like, Jesus, I want to get that tattooed on me right now. I mean, I'm looking
the
at this page and I want to put it on my arm, right? Oh my
the
God.
the other one's the Hemingway quote. I believe the world to be a beautiful place, and I very much hate to leave it.
Yeah.
Like just the little things like that. You're like, God Almighty.
The
Um,
lines that stick with me every time are the sincerity. The crossing, Cormac, he says at the end, every man stands in for, I'm gonna get the quote wrong. Every man standing in for the others. Will you love this man? And
mhm.
I think about that all of the time, and it's an incredibly sincere line in a really a repertoire of books that don't include a lot of sincerity. They
Yeah,
include a lot of awful people.
yeah. Or all right, here we go. North Carolina. This one sticks with me all the time. You're gonna know where I'm at as soon as I read it. A stone, a leaf, an unfound door. Of a stone, a leaf, a door, and of all the forgotten faces.
Uh-huh.
Like, look, Homeward Angel, man. Like
Yeah.
that book. It's
Yeah.
it's long, but God, it's worth it by the time you get to the end of it. Like, there's just certain lines that that stick with you. And I think that
Mm-hmm.
going back to your short fiction, if you can fill a piece of short fiction with sentences like that, then you're going to write successful short fiction.
Mm-hmm.
If
Yeah.
it's full of just this happens, then this happens, then this happens, then I think that's what makes a boring story. And I
Yeah.
got criticized a lot in my MFA for having open-ended stories. Like
Mm.
I feel like we need an ending. Well, the ending is life. The ending is you don't know what happens.
Yeah. Life
Like
goes on after the story's over. Yeah.
I've
Yeah.
I've given you everything. Now it's up to you as the reader to do some work and figure out,
Mm.
and I'm not trying to make you do a lot of hard work. Like I've given you all the context. The story that I had in the mule, the little boy's excited that his dad's coming home from prison. I give
Yeah.
you why he's in prison. He comes home. He thinks his parents are asleep. They've obviously OD'd, but he's too naive to know
Mm-hmm.
that. And then the end of the story is just like, I want to go home now. And his papa's like, yeah, I'm not sure we're going to be able to do that,
Yeah.
and that ending got a lot of pushback because some people were like, well, are they dead? And I'm like, I thought I
Figure it
made it
out.
pretty clear. Yeah. I'm like, I thought it was pretty clear that they were dead, uh, but yeah, I think on some part
Yeah.
that intrigues me that
Yeah.
if you read a story where the story's good, I think at the end of it, there's payoff, whether there's a payoff or not,
Mm.
you know? And
Mm.
in the story you sent me,
Mm-hmm.
there's that O. Henry moment at the end of it. There is that twist, where you think one thing's going to happen and then something else happens.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's open ended too. I don't think there's closure with that story. Do you?
No, not at all. I don't.
There's
Well,
definitely
yeah.
a darkness that leaves that story hanging.
Yeah. I'm not very good at talking about my own work. I'll be honest. Um, but I certainly didn't intend for it. I don't know how much intention I ever have, but I certainly didn't intend for it to be a closed and shut story.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that I have any like that, to be honest.
Yeah.
I love an
I
open
don't,
ending.
I do too. And I think the ones that have a nice, tidy ending for me are, maybe the weaker ones. I don't know. That
Mm.
might be what I call my first collection of stories, open endings.
That's not too
Either the,
bad. I mean,
but I just I don't have a lot. I mean, I have one. Um, I think Flower Beds has got a pretty good ending, but it's just, that's the ending of that story. I think the story gives you what it needs. The story will
yeah.
give you the ending that you're after.
Oh
So
yeah. I could talk about that all
yeah.
the time.
So we've almost done the hour, but I want to move. I want to do one thing before we get to the
Mhm.
obligatory last question. I do think so I'm trying to do this in seasons, right?
Mhm.
So we're gonna have season 1, season 2, and I've got one more episode after your episode, and that will get us out to that'll get us out to September,
Mm.
which is fine weather in the South for a get together. So I think maybe we should start looking at the Fair to Midland Literary Conference. I think
Man,
that would be a heck of a good time. We'd have to
I
find
would
some
love it.
place central where we could get
Yeah,
everybody at
yeah,
one
yeah.
time. I think that'd be a hell of a good time.
That would be
So
awesome.
with piggybacking off that, we get to talk about invites now, right? So
Mhm.
any writer living dead, you invite 3 to dinner, and what are you going to serve those folks?
Man, I have as soon as I listened to the first podcast, I started thinking about my answer, and I don't think I still don't think I have a great one. I think George Saunders would be there.
It'd be fun.
He would just be awesome. I buy his newsletter, pay for his newsletter, whatever it is,
I used to
and
do that too.
it's awesome,
Yeah.
man. It's just his
It's
little
like a
office
mini
hours are
cheap.
great.
Yeah, it's a mini cheap MFA basically.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think he just comes off as a really great guy. Um, gosh, it wouldn't be Cormac. As much as I love him, he wouldn't want to be there. I
They
think
wouldn't.
Dennis Johnson is probably my most beloved, not Southern at all author. And I just listened to an old Tin House podcast where he reads and he gives an interview and everything. And he just seemed like such a great guy, which if you've ever read Dennis
Yeah.
Johnson and how dark everything he writes is, I was really amazed by how funny and awesome he was.
Mm.
Gosh, who else? I don't know. I think John McPhee, who's very old. I don't know if you know him. He's not a fiction writer. He wrote for the New Yorker for years.
He's the
I've
bass
read
player. He's the bass player for Fleetwood Mac.
John McPhee. He's that's true. It's this guy. If you haven't read him, he's a nonfiction writer. He's
Okay.
like 90 now, but he wrote like 20 nonfiction books. He won the Pulitzer Prize for one of them.
Okay.
And he has a book called Oranges. I think I've read 10 of his books. He has a book called Oranges. It's about the history of oranges. It's an entire book, and it is so fantastic.
Yeah.
And I think that even goes back. That's another answer for the question earlier. I would want to just know how do you do this, man? How are you able to
How do you make
book?
oranges interesting? Yeah.
I mean, literally, yeah.
One of my favorite
Absolutely.
books from grad school was, I told this on the first pod too. I initially went to grad school for history. So I've got a history master's and I've got an MFA in creative writing. And my history is ag history. So one of the books that we read, it's so funny you said this. Mine's on corn, and it's by Arturo Warman, and it's called "Corn and Capitalism: How a Botanical Bastard Came to Take Over the World." And when I read that, I was so naive. I didn't know that corn didn't exist. Like corn is the first genetically modified crop in the history of the world, where they just took a seed and took the biggest seed and planted the biggest seed until we finally got corn. And it's in absolutely everything that we interact with. That book blew my mind.
That's awesome.
Absolutely blew my mind. Yours is oranges and mine's corn. So
I find people that can do that and write a whole book about it and write an engaging, and in this case, a really beautiful book. I find that, I mean, God, I just want to shake their hand. I'm amazed.
Yeah. Donald Worster's the Dust Bowl is that way.
I have heard that book is really good.
That's a great book. I think I wrote in a review for that book in school that books like this is what made me want to study history. Like it's just it's a great book. It's a good book to read if you just want to read a book about the Great Depression and the Dust Bowl. So,
man, that's awesome.
Yeah.
What would I serve them?
Yeah. What would you serve them? What is the quintessential North Carolina dish?
Oh, well, it would be pork barbecue, but I wouldn't be able to do it worth a damn. I would, if I was serving them that, I'd go out and I'd drive back home and buy it,
bring it in. I'd jump the bridge to Memphis. Yeah, that's what I would do.
Man, if I had to cook, I pride myself on my my cooking, and I think my wife would say the same thing. And I've recently learned how to do braised short ribs and like a really good mashed potato, man. And I think that would be it. If I had those people that I think are all amazing or were amazing, I would have to cook them something unbelievable.
I taught myself how to make real authentic French onion soup the other day. Man, I couldn't be any more proud of soup. That's like anything in my life. And there's not a lot to it. It's just it takes a long time if you're making it from scratch. And I think by the time you get done with it, you're like, hell yeah, I made some soup. You know,
man, the short rib is so easy.
Yeah, and you just braise it.
I did, red wine and beef juice and all that stuff. I mean, just your normal old stuff, But I remember I took the first bite of it a couple months ago when I cooked it. And I did like a French mashed potato with a lot of butter and stuff.
Yeah.
And I almost cried.
Yeah.
I was like, I've accomplished something today.
I've been there. Hey, this is a no shit story. And my wife will listen to this podcast in 3 or 4 months and she will laugh out loud. I cooked risotto 7 nights in a row one time. Just because I figured it out. Like I had risotto any way you could have risotto.
That's awesome.
And it'd take me like 45 minutes to make it, but you're in there with your spoon just stirring this rice and you're like,
man, when I figured out how to cook a steak on a stainless steel pan, my wife finally about a month ago told me I don't want to eat a steak every week. Because our Food Lion, if you might not have a Food Lion, I don't know.
I know Food Lion, yeah.
Our Food Lion, for whatever reason, the steak is on sale every week. I don't know why. So I mean, I'd be losing money not to buy it.
It is not here.
I'd be losing money not to buy these steaks. And she finally said, Trent, I'm tired of eating steak every week. And I was like, but I just figured it out. I've been experimenting.
Yeah. What are you buying? Ribeyes?
Ribeyes and New York strip, which one of the two was on sale. Literally, I'm not joking. Every week, I've told my friends, a select few, hey, here's the address. Go to this food line. It'll be on sale. I promise.
Well, maybe it's 3. Is it 3 years now? I've been smoking a prime rib for Christmas, and I've been going to Sam's and buying like a whole side of ribeye, and now it's become an internet thing, and everybody wants a beef ribeye. I went in there. So the first year I did it, I bought it for $90. Last year I paid 110. This year, the same size rib roast cost me $189. And we had to have. I finally told everybody, I'm like, look, if we're doing this, you're chipping in. Like this is your Christmas present. Yeah, it's just unreal. All because of the internet. I mean, it's just when something.
Well, I tell you what,
viral.
If we hold this Fair to Middlin Writers Conference in North Carolina, I'll go buy every steak they have at this food line. I'm telling you, they're half off every week. And there's a bunch of food lines in Raleigh, so I'm fine. Nobody will be able to figure it out.
I love it. Hey, Raleigh's a booming town. That might be the place to have it. I know Sheldon's going to want to have it in Lexington. That's where he's going to vote. He said something about that online the other day. He's like, man, I wish AWP was over in our neck of the woods.
Yeah,
he said if it is, they'll probably put it in Louisville, but I'd like it to be in Lexington.
I saw that tweet. That's right.
Yeah. But Lexington's a cool town. That'd be a good place to have it.
I've never been. I would love to.
We went last year. Well, we're coming this year. Actually, we're coming over there for the Railbird Fest. It's a really good concert. Lots of good people there. And we went last year. It's an outdoor festival, which I'm not really keen on. You're all dirty by the end of it, but we only did one day last year. We're doing one day this year, but there's a lot of good people there, and it's a heck of a good time. You can have a good time in that town. It's fun.
That's awesome.
But I might put that as an intro to the next podcast. Hey, if you are interested in creating our own little conference, that would be cool. Because I think the people that would show up, I know Adam from Cowboy Jamboree's in South Carolina. Then you're in North Carolina, and there's just a lot of people. Everybody is from Arkansas East, pretty much.
We can call it CWP, the Country Writers.
That's right.
Whatever the piece is. Yeah.
That's right.
Pretty good. Hey, I just submitted a story to Cowboy Jamboree for the first time for the covers. I think you said that you did or you were going to.
I did. What'd you cover?
You
don't have to tell me the story. I don't want you to give that away. Who did you cover?
I covered Dennis. I said that I was covering Dennis Johnson as if he had grown up in the country, was what I was trying to do with it, which is maybe what I'm trying to do with my whole shtick. But it was fun. That was cool.
I covered James Joyce. Which
good luck.
Nobody would have picked that one. I picked a short story. From the Dubliners and just changed the setting to my neck of the woods. And I think it worked. We'll hope it gets picked up. But
that's awesome.
I thought it turned out really good because did you feel dirty doing it?
I
felt like I am plagiarizing.
I saw that he said it didn't matter if you lightly or and I did lightly. I'll say I kind of leaned into to Jesus' son and what's his name? Fuckhead, I think is his name.
Yeah,
I kind of leaned into like a country character like that, and his name is Skeeter. But I say that because I have been in that covering someone, and it made me feel awful.
It does make you feel weird. And I think that has to do with my history background too. Like I didn't plagiarize the story, but when you're writing something that's so close, like and you're covering a story, that's tough to do because you're taught not to do that, and then when you're setting out to do it, like that's the prompt. That's a really interesting exercise to go through.
Yeah. You wish you could tell him, I'm sorry.
Yeah. I hope I do this justice. But in my case, he's dead and the story's more than 100 years old. So it's okay. It's okay.
Oh,
So
that's
I think
good.
the British have different laws on that, but I think for what
That's
we're doing,
good.
it's okay. But yeah, that was fun, and I hope there's more of that. I'm looking forward to that episode and when the acceptances start coming out because I think it'd be cool to see what people picked and how they
It
did
would
it.
it would be really cool. I mean, yeah, I've been following CJ for a while, and they're just awesome. It's
Yeah,
really cool. And
there's some
congrats on your
really
book too, man. That's
thank you.
awesome.
I appreciate that. I feel weird when people say that on here now. I'm like, I do appreciate it, but it is weird.
Yeah,
It's
I
like
get
you
it.
said when you don't know, you don't like talking about your stuff. Like
Uh-huh.
I don't mind talking about it, but you're just like, yeah, it feels good, you know.
Oh,
So
I people will ask me about my stuff, and I'll say once it's done, I'll describe it to you, but I won't
yeah,
tell you that it's good because I have no idea.
yeah, I think that's where I'm at too. Like I'm ready to get to that point to where you can have that discussion about it. Like I'm anxious for folks to
Uh-huh.
read it. Like that's
Yeah.
to the point where I'm at because you will find out and you get this a little bit with short stories, but I think you're going to really figure it out when you get to work on this novel. You're going to spend a year with these people and
Hmm.
then you're going to spend another 6 months rereading them and trying to really sharpen who they are and figure out who they are. And then it's like, okay, then I got to send it out to other people and let them read it. And then they're going to send you suggestions. And then you're like, okay, what do I do with these? Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
so, I mean, by the time any book comes out, you've lived with it for 2 years and you're just ready for people to read it. And that's where I'm at right now. I'm ready for somebody other than me to read it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've revised it some, and I wrote it incredibly fast. It was like I got under a spell writing, and I didn't
Mhm.
want to do anything else. But
Oh,
man, I found
exorcism writing got you.
yeah,
Yeah.
I wrote 60,000 words in 2 weeks, which I
Yeah.
have never written that many words before that in
Mm.
3 years. But I found one agent, and what she wanted was exactly. And I said, well, she probably won't answer for a little while, so I'll go ahead and query. And she asked for the full manuscript in 4 days, and I was like,
Mm.
"Here you go. I hope it's good."
Yeah. Yeah. Did she
So
take it? Did she pick it up?
it was this happened literally a couple days ago, so I have no
Yeah.
idea. I mean, it might take a while, but I was. This is not me bragging. This is me going, son of
Holy
a
shit.
gun. I
Yeah.
have not.
Yeah.
I hope it makes sense because I have not. I might have jumped the gun on this. So
If she's a good agent, she'll read it and she'll see there's something there. She obviously saw something in it or she wouldn't have
yeah.
requested a full. I have sent here's the one that burns me up is
Uh-huh.
you do what you did and they request a full and then you get rejected the next day. You didn't read that book.
Oh no, no way. Yeah.
You know, and that happens. Like that happens a lot. And that's not just me. I'm not going to name this writer, but I had a writer send one out, get a same day request the full, was rejected the same day.
I
How's
mean, there's
that
no
work?
way they read more than what was under the query.
Right, right. So you request the full, then you read at max. I don't know how fast you can read or how much you can read, but let's just cap it at 10 chapters, right? You read 10 chapters in a day and you're like, this is not for me. Like, oh, you know where I'm at with agents.
Man, the
So,
business I get I heard an agent on a podcast the other day say that she gets like 200 queries a week or something crazy.
hmm.
And I went, I get it. The
Yeah,
business was not made for this many writers
yeah,
and this many books, and
yeah,
I get it. But I do think that sometimes they ask for it, and then maybe they go, "I don't have time to do this. What was I thinking?" That
yeah.
has to be the only way that happens.
Or
Otherwise, you're the
the
fastest reader on the planet.
or the query was so good that when they read the writing let the query down.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah, I
that's
could
the
believe
other
that.
thing. So I don't know. I wish everybody the best for what they do. It's tough. I mean, it is tough. Like it's not. If anybody's listening to this and they've not tried it, we're not talking tens of rejections. Like we're talking 20s, 30s, 40s, sometimes hundreds of rejections before you ever one get an agent or two
Hmm.
get somebody to request a full manuscript, and even then, after they read it, it's not a guarantee of success. That's just the thing. That's tough.
I
And
woke up to
it's
a
terrifying.
rejection this morning.
I did too. I did too. I had a weird one today, though. I had, what do we want to call this? We got to term it something. I had a rejection, and then I had what I'm going to call a soft acceptance, where they loved the story, but they wanted me to change just a couple things.
Oh yeah,
And I
yeah,
was
I've had
like,
that before.
okay, I'm good with that. I will do that totally,
Mhm.
and then I will resubmit it because I really want it to go to this place.
I've done
I
that
think it'd
once.
be a perfect home for it, and I'm okay to make the edits that they want
Yeah,
me to make. And I think that is what enough people don't do. A lot of
it's
people will
so
just
awesome.
say it's not for us. Not a
Mhm.
lot of people take the time to say, I love this story. This story would be better if you would just add this one sentence. And that's
Yep.
literally all they asked me to do. They said, add one contextual sentence somewhere early in this story, and then the story's fine.
I
You know?
have I've done that a couple times since I've started editing for this magazine. Um, and I do it because I think every time that someone has done anything close to that for me from one of these lit mags, it's been so helpful for me.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen the story. The one time I have a story coming out in JMWW in April, and I wanted a story there so bad. I love all their stories.
Mm-hmm.
And they told me, hey, we really liked this, but we think you need another section. It's written in a bunch of different voices. We think you need this other voice. And I was like, hell yeah, you're right. That's amazing.
Yeah.
I totally didn't
Yeah.
see
Cause
that. That's great advice.
you've read it so many times, you
Yeah.
become
Yeah.
blind to it, and you need
Yeah.
somebody else to say, hey, this is all that it needs.
It's really
Because like
helpful.
any writer, you can tell when it's good, but sometimes you can't tell when it's perfect, and you need
Mm-hmm.
somebody to say, hey, this is what we need to change. So yeah, I'm grateful for that, and hopefully after resubmitting it, that gets picked up too. So
Yeah.
we'll see.
Good
That's
luck,
what it's
man. That's
all
awesome.
about. Yes. So is there anything you want to market, put out there, tell people to go get?
Oh man, I've got a whole bunch of stories on my website, and it's on my
You
Twitter
do.
if that's the easiest way to
Yeah.
put it. But yeah, to that agent who has my novel, I hope you like it if you somehow listen to this, and
Yes.
I hope it's good. But
And the
yeah,
website is Trent Brown Writes, correct? Is
yeah,
that
it's
it?
it's .squarespace.com.
Yeah.
That's the easiest way to put it. But you can go to my Twitter and find it. Yeah, man. If somebody reads my story, I'd love to know what they think of it because I I find that anybody telling you anything about, hey, I read your story and this is what I thought, I found it awesome. I
Yeah.
think
It's
it
super
might
helpful.
be it's I'm not looking for gratification, but sometimes I just want to know what somebody else thought of it, even if they didn't like
You
it.
Well, we will close on this. As an ex-musician, it's nice when people clap for you because
Ain't that the truth?
they liked it, and if they don't clap, you don't know if they liked it or not. There's nothing
Right.
more awkward than playing a song and finishing the song and
That's a
just
good point.
crickets.
Amen.
So,
Amen.
all right, my friend. Well, thank you for coming on. I appreciate it. It was a good conversation.
Yeah,
Enjoyed
thanks,
it.
man. This is
All
awesome.
right. Well, I will see you around. If you want to get in touch with Trent, you can find him on Twitter. He's more than happy to drop a line with you or DM and talk to you about writing. And he's a good guy. Thank you for this, my friend.
Thanks, man.
All right. Have a good evening, brother.
You too. This was awesome.
All right. See you, man.